Morning. Rightio, sorry, we're going to start. Hello. Right, okay. There's a little bit of housekeeping this morning, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. We've got a 2-hour session this morning on the CPT. Morning tea is at 10 here, but you're going to have to scoff your scone and drink your tea and then hop on the bus if you're taking the bus. Take your luggage with you on the bus. The buses will, at the end of the day, go to the airport as well and back here. So we can direct that. So just make sure that you have got your luggage with you if you need to. There is parking at the showgrounds, which I will show you. So if you're looking at the satellite picture, there's the Elwood Road down the side there, and you see the wee brown building. The parking is out the front of where have I got the little, there. Parking is out here. So you're coming in off Elwood Road down this way, coming in here and parking in here. And the doorway to get in is about here. We're going to have all sorts of workshops and things set up in and around here. Right. Oh yeah, that's a much better picture. Right. Okay. So for today, I've just got... So, this morning, we're talking about the CPT. We have Hamish Belsky is our chair of the session, and this morning, I asked Hamish for a little bio yesterday, and he didn't have anything, so I was going to ring his mum, but luckily, I don't have any photographs from Form 2 and all that sort of stuff, but Hamish sent me something last night. So, Hamish was born and bred on a farm, sheep and beef farm in Rangiwahia, in northern Manawatu. He started farming career at Smedley Station, graduated from Lincoln, and soon after married a southern girl named Amy. After a 7-year period as a sheep genetics manager, they entered into an equity partnership on a 300-hectare farm near Clinton 3 years ago. This farm runs commercial sheep, cattle, and grain using regenerative farming principles, which restores the environment and profit. Hamish is also helping out beef and lamb genetics with the ewe stability and the G/E trial work. Thank you, Hamish.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't. Good morning, everybody. Who here watched the America's Cup this morning? I know, how good was that? Let's give them a clap. I will forever remember being in Hawke's Bay, Napier. Where were you when we won the America's Cup and we were here? So it's a wonderful place to be. Now, this session on CPT and connectedness is quite dear to me, because when I first went down to Mount Linton as a sheep genetics manager, I was very green, and really, when I look back, I had no idea about sheep genetics. But one of my key questions was, when I was a commercial farmer, was, how do I know that your rams are the best in New Zealand? Because all breeders tell us that their rams are the best in New Zealand. We've got the best rams. But as a commercial farmer, I didn't know if I could trust that. And so when I got to Mount Linton and understood connectedness and the value of the CPT trial, I then realised how we can then compare one flock to another. And there's been amazing breeding groups that have developed through New Zealand, like the Wairapa Development Group, Auckland Romney Development Group, and others, that started off that connectedness and that ability to compare between flocks. Now, they are the fundamentals to what we can produce in our genetics from here on. With genomics and everything, we need connectedness. So today we've got Neville, Annie and Julia going to explain a bit more about what's happening behind the scenes with the CPT and the importance of connectedness, so that as commercial farmers we can have confidence that we are buying the best rams we possibly can buy to suit our operation. So first up we have Neville Jopson, and I will, actually, I was meant to have the bio for you, Neville, but everyone knows Neville, so here we go, give him a hand.
Thank you for that. So I'm going to spend the first bit just going through basically the objectives and outcomes from the CPT. Those of you who are looking at the screen and see it as rather fuzzy, that's you. You had a good night last night, but it's actually in good focus. Right, so the aims of the central progeny test, these haven't changed very much at all since it began many, many years ago. They've been to increase, the overall aim has been to increase the genetic merit of the New Zealand sheep flock. That's why we're there. You know, it's not to provide jobs for scientists or things like that. It's all about helping make better decisions about genetic merit, which rams are the best, and being able to compare that across as many flocks as possible. In order to do that, part of it has been to foster links between the various ram breeding groups, and there are a large number of those in New Zealand. And so a major part of that has been to strengthen genetic connections, and that's been absolutely vital for providing the infrastructure that we need to do national evaluations. And so that was originally the SIL-ACE analysis, and now that's turned into the NZGE. Part of it is we've been collecting a lot of measurements, and so we've been able to also estimate out genetic parameters, the numbers that we need to deliver breeding values for novel traits. So Viascan was something that came in that we were able to estimate parameters out and update the SIL meat module to include some meat processor grading systems, and also try and help industry understanding of those traits as we've moved along. And the other thing that it's been is the CPT is an incredibly unique sampling of the New Zealand industry. You people have all been very gracious in putting your rams in, and that's given us a facility that other scientists have been able to come and say, can we use the central progeny test for our research, because it is an incredibly unique sampling of where the New Zealand industry is at. So that's been a fantastic resource. That's not part of the CPT, but it's been a tremendous benefit that it's also provided for the industry. John McEwen has been a great mentor to me over the years, and so I feel obliged that I have to say historically, what you will need to understand is, here's where the central progeny test has come from. It was established in 2002 with Alliance as the organisation that funded it. It was originally we evaluated both dual purpose and terminal sires, but because it was Alliance and they were looking mainly at terminal performance, they wanted to provide information to breeders. Their reason for being there was to provide information to breeders to help them find animals that would perform well for them. After 3 or 4 years, they were the sole funder for 3 years. Then Meat and Wool at the time, came to the party. Some daughters were retained, and we started doing dual purpose and measuring some maternal traits as well. That went through Beef and Lamb New Zealand, and finally it's ended up being the Beef and Lamb New Zealand Genetics Central Progeny Test. We've had up to 5 sites that have been the core part of that. Started off with 1, made it up to 5, and they've spanned both North and South Island and lowland and hill environments. So we've had pretty good coverage of all those environments as we've been evaluating these animals. 2 years ago, there was a major review. The program had been running for a long time, and so you don't want to just sit there and become stale. It was a major part of the BLG program, and so there was a big look at it to see, is it fit for purpose? It's worked for 13 years, 14 years, but is that fit for the purpose going forward? What can we do? So an independent review was commissioned, and Brian Wickham, who's been mentioned a few times here, was the leader on that. And he went around and consulted widely with breeders and scientists and other stakeholders at meetings to gauge their engagement with the central progeny test, their understanding of what it was doing, and how could it go forward and deliver more benefit to the industry. And he reported to the Beef and Lamb Genetics Board and gave them a whole heap of options, and they reviewed those, and we've been working on implementing a lot of those changes over the last 2 years. So the main outcomes of the review, The beef and lamb genetics program was very much about genotype by environment interaction. We were losing land to dairy, animals were increasingly being farmed on the hill, and so he suggested that we don't need to know what they're like on the easier country, we should be spending our time looking at how they perform on the hard country. And so he said, focus on evaluating in the type of environment where sheep are actually being farmed. One of the key things he suggested was that we divide the program into two parts, which we're calling research hubs, or the CPT hub program, and I'm going to spend most of my time talking about that and the next generation sites. And for the research hubs, he suggested that we reduce them in number, but that is the CPT as you know it continuing on. And I'll just spend a bit more time talking about that shortly. The next generation sites, he was suggesting that we use younger rams, because in the hubs they're all old and they're already proven. They're pretty old by the time we get breeding values back for those. So using young rams and collaborate with industry groups to try and get more engagement in the program. And the last two were things that came from consultation with breeders. There was a very strong focus on having a single set of SIL breeding values because we had a large number. They were very confusing. So one version of the truth across the entire program. There was also feedback about the results, and there were the league table, the results in the booklet with the CPT rams ranked. There was feedback that probably wasn't very helpful, and so was it really needed. So just to concentrate on the difference between the hubs versus the next generation program, we've got this table here, just to compare and contrast. And so the hub flocks are the CPT as we know it. So basically, they're on properties that are either research and development, they're research stations, or they're places that we can do a bit more work. Whereas the next generation sites, they're breed-specific, supposed to be breed-specific, industry-relevant, and working with industry groups. So most of them are on commercial properties where we don't have technicians that are on those farms, and we can't be as invasive as we can be on a research farm in terms of having people on and collecting a lot of measurements. Still on hill and lowland environments, we've got one in the North Island and one in the South Island. Mating is by AI with widely used rams, so they're already proven. So they evaluating, it's a big resource, but we can't actually evaluate that many rams. So we've been going along doing about 20 to 25 rams a year. And there are important links between years and between years in the hub and between the next generation sites. And I'll just walk through the importance of that shortly. And it's fully funded by BLG. The next generation sites are predominantly hill and run on commercial properties. Because we want to use young sires, and then the major focus is on natural mating so that these young, unproven rams can come to the property and be evaluated. There's the opportunity to greatly expand the number of rams that we're evaluating, and that's one of the key benefits here. Many rams per year, so up to 40 rams per site, and there are a number of sites. And Annie's going to talk about the sites, so you'll see, but we can evaluate many more rams than we're able to do in the hub program. There, they have link sires between years, so they can do evaluations, and also rams from that are going into the hub, so that connectedness can come from this. A major difference, though, is that they're industry-sponsored and only partially funded by BLG. So we're looking for communities of interest that want to do some progeny testing, and BLG is helping them with design and making sure that they deliver well for those groups. Hopefully this is not a new slide to anybody. You're all hopefully familiar with the ram selection process. We send out an expression of interest form in November each year to all SIL breeders, and that's made in November. We allocate some spaces. We've got spaces for around about 24 rams, and we have to put some of those into link sires, so making sure we've got connections between years. We also have links now to the next generation flock, so they get some rams basically in preference because we need to make sure that they are well connected, and that because they are representing, a substantial little subset of the industry. And then the remainder are allocated in an open call, and so that's for the expression of interest that come in from you as ram breeders. And our first selection criteria for those is that we look at the ones that come in and we try and figure out if we allocate that ram spot, what does that do in terms of connectedness? So it's not done on a breed representation basis. It's done that if we could connect 10 flocks by using one ram or 3 flocks by using another ram, then the preference would go to the one that would bring in 10 flocks. However, we do try and make sure that everybody gets their turn. So the second criteria is that there is a breed or strain representation focus. And then we also have some special interest ones. So we've been putting in semen that we've sourced from rams that were around in the 1990s. Part of that is to see how well the industry has improved, give us a really good benchmark, but also we've got these connections between flocks that happen from year to year that we're basing our industry evaluations on. It really helps us if we go back and have a look in the past and make sure that the genetic trends graphs that we've got give a really good anchor to say that we're going back, so that's really good. And then there's also the option, it's quite expensive, but a few people have used it. If you don't get in through the call, there is the option to put a ram in and pay for it, either by yourself or with a group. So there is room on those properties to do some more rams, but it's just that BLG is able to put investment into a certain amount and people can get them in if they want to over and above that. Just one slide on the NZGE. Sherilyn spoke about that yesterday, so I don't need to say much about it. But the important thing is that a vital part of that is that the CPT hub provides very important crossbreed connectedness that isn't happening elsewhere in the industry. It's a question, is it actually providing enough to do that? But it's a key part. What is enough? We could double it and spend a lot more money. Is it doing enough? And it's certainly doing enough for basic things, but it's a good thing to look at. So I just want to, Julia's going to spend time talking about what connectedness is. I just want to show you where it all fits with the industry. A few of you have seen this before, so I do apologise to those people. But what we've got here, I've just represented in a very simple diagram. Each of these circles represents a flock, and each of these lines indicates that they have shared rams. So that's a connection. And what I've put up here is just, we've got a Romney group, it's a sire reference group, and they're sharing some rams. And so we've got connections between all of these flocks. We can get from this flock here to this flock here because we've got all these connections that we can go through. So they can compare breeding values for their sire reference group. But the Romney group, there are a number of Romney groups throughout the country that all have either a geographical or a different focus. And so we've got a second Romney group over here, for example. Once again, we've got nice connections between that. And occasionally they do share some rams, so there are some connections, but they're probably not as good as these ones here, which are done regularly. The Romneys are obviously not the only breed in the industry. We've got the Perindales here that have a national program, so they've got all their flocks connected nicely over sitting there. We've got some terminal sires, so over here we've got the Pole Dorsets and the Texels, and all these groups are doing a reasonable job of being connected within themselves. And occasionally there are some breeders that just can't help themselves and they just love crossing and making composites and doing things like that. So we do have some connections that occur across breed. So the central progeny test is not the only place that across breed connections happen, but we're not terribly structured in the way that we're doing that. So that's happening because of breeder interest and things like that. They're trying to get new trying to improve traits and produce composites and things like that. So here we have our CPT hub, and it gets, because it brings rams in that are already widely used in the industry, then it creates all of these things. So this is the critical structure, the big spider web. The more of these things that we can, the more of these bars that we can get where rams are shared between, then the better the connections and the more effective the New Zealand NZGE is. So that's really important. And so these links here, to get from, for example, the Pole Dorsets to the Perindales or whatever the breed mix, a lot of those are not happening naturally in the industry, and so that's the key. So the central progeny test does not provide the only connectedness, but it's a key part of it, doing bits that wouldn't happen otherwise. So the program has been reviewed, and this is the slide that's generally put up, that has been put up to just describe the next generation flocks, where they fit in. So we've got the hubs up here, and they are, we've got some on the hill, we've got some on lowland, and then we've got a heap of these next generation sites down here. They're sharing some rams, so we've got links. But I think it's probably more helpful if we just go back to this diagram and see whereabouts do the next generation flocks sit in this. So this was the industry. I've just removed a couple of things, but we've got our spider web. But we've got, for example, the next generation flock that's run on Horizon Farming Limited up here, and we've got one over at Smedley Station. There are others, and Annie will talk through those. But they are connected to this is a Perrindale progeny test, and so they've got connections coming in here, and that creates additional connections for them. But then this will also, they get rams in here, so that provides the connectedness that these ones here are coming in through. And likewise, this one here, it was a terminal sire focus, not a breed focus, and so we had some Poll Dorsets and Texels and Suffolks and other things coming in. So it's just thickening out, filling in our spider web, making more of those connections, and hopefully giving us better structure to be able to deliver those across flock and across breed evaluations. So now I'm just going to really focus on the hub. In terms of restructuring the hub sites, there were 5 sites. Invermay, which is down in Mosgiel, Taratahi, it's changed property a couple of times, so we're calling it Taratahi rather than the farm name, but that's up here. Ashley Dean was the Lincoln University dryland farm. Pukawa, obviously everybody up here should be familiar, we're not terribly far away from that. And Onslow View, which is a hill country property close to Miller's Flat in central Otago. Excuse me. The green line indicates basically that it's operating in business as usual, and so the decision has been made that these 2 flocks would be the ongoing research hub sites going forward. Ashley Dean and Pukawa were identified as being basically surplus to requirements and were being phased out. Ashley Dean decided that they would withdraw immediately, that they had competing issues for that land, and so the ewes from that went to Invermay, and they've continued on in the program. At Pukawa, they've managed it out, so no new CPT matings, but they had dual-purpose daughters retained, and so they're just being mated to flock rams there, being recorded, and over 3 years they phase out of the program. Onslow View also just voluntarily decided that they had the program had run its course there. They had quite enjoyed it, but they'd decided the time was up, and they've agreed that they will manage those animals out. So once again, no new CPT matings this year, and they will just manage out the dual-purpose ewes that they've got. So we were thinking that we would have 3 properties, but when we reviewed it, we figured that with the research hub program, it was sufficient to have just the 2 sites as long as we had sufficient rams evaluated. So 2 sites going forward, and the other ones either withdrawing or being managed out. So over the course of the period, 20 rams per year doesn't sound like much, but it's been running since 2002. So to date, 351 sires from 42 breeds have been evaluated. 23 of those were terminal breeds, and 20 of those were dual purpose. Those of you who can do a bit of maths at this hour of the morning will notice those 2 numbers don't sum to give you 42. One of those breeds has been evaluated both as a terminal and as a dual purpose. This year, 22 new proven rams are being mated by AI, so that means rams that have already been used in the industry. In March, and we've got a significant number of rams, over 130 of them now, which have maternal breeding values. That took a while to build up when we were doing the program. Terminal size, you get results immediately. The dual-purpose animals, it just takes a while to generate those. So good numbers of animals that now have maternal connections for maternal breeding values. So what industry benefits have been delivered? The main goal of the research hubs has been to create and maintain those genetic connections, and that's been a big part of the program. The other thing was, I think it's fair to say that it did stimulate a lot of interest in the industry, so people started doing their own progeny testing, either because they thought we were doing a good job, well, that's what I'd like to think, and that was a good thing, but some people probably did it because they thought we were doing a bad job, and that they'd do it right and also create some connections. Either way, that's a great result for the industry, getting more connections to strengthen our evaluations. It's allowed us the crossbreed genetic connections that we need for the NZGE, as we've said already. We've been able to calculate out new genetic parameters, and a lot of those have gone into the SIL meat module and are a key part in the redevelopment of it. So I was speaking on that yesterday. The CPT is a key part of that program. There has been an enormous amount of work as well that's come in. Research on meat quality, lamb survival, internal parasites, residual feed intake, greenhouse gas emissions, wall parameters. They've come along and said, can we sample these animals for our program? So it's been a great benefit for that. You saw one of these yesterday. You are used to seeing the traffic lights. When the scientists look at it, we want to look across a whole industry. And so this is the way that I look at connectedness and want to see. And I just want to show you the benefit that the central progeny test has provided in doing that. This is for the meat gold trait group. And if we include the central progeny tests, flocks, all the data that we've collected for that in the meat gold trait group, what impact does it have? Or what impact, if the CPT hadn't come along, what would it look like? So this is what it looks like if it is in. If you've got, this is all the cell flocks that measure for meat down here, and they're impossible to see. You have to magnify that to about 500% to see individual flocks. But if you've got a short distance between two flocks, they're very well connected. These ones here that all come out here are all unconnected, and the point that I've put is this blue bit, these flocks are all considered unconnected. All these ones here are connected together because of the central progeny test. So about 2/3 of the flocks that are recording for meat, when I did this is a couple of years old, but it demonstrates the point really well. About 2/3 of the industry were connected for meat so we could do valid comparisons of their breeding values. What would happen if we just remove the central progeny test from that analysis? This is what happens. So we've still got, lots of connections here, but we've had groups fall out. And so you can see we've got clusters here that are connected to each other, but they're no longer connected to our first cluster. And so we're now sitting at only 1/3 of the flocks are actually connected, so you can do valid comparisons. And if you look into that and look at the flocks that form all of those, this little cluster here, that's a Pole Dorset sire reference group. That's a Perrindale sire reference group. That's a Corriedale sire reference group. That's a Coopworth one, a Dorset down. All of those, you can look at them and say that's a sire reference group. And so by using a RAM from those, we were able to establish connections so that we can end up with this picture, which is really good. It would be nice if it came down a bit further, but you can see we've added probably about 30% of the flocks to that analysis because of the central progeny test. So that's a great result. Genetic parameters, I said this yesterday, so I'm just repeating myself, but the cell carcass parameters that we're currently using in the meat module are still largely based on Dan Waldron's work in the late 1980s, which, as I told you, was done on 13.6 kilogram carcasses with an eye muscle the size of a 20-cent coin. The central progeny test now has an excess of 6,000 progeny recorded from 351 sires at an average carcass weight of 18. So we've got a data set there that's substantially bigger. It wasn't designed specifically for that purpose, but that's a great resource to be able to go and look at those things. And the cell meat module now includes the Alliance Group's ViaScan system because of this data set, plus some ultrasound and CT, and so it's been a great resource for doing that. So it's really delivered a lot in that regard. A major part of the program has been genotype by environment interactions, and the CPT is a unique resource for this study because in 2013 the decision was made that we were using we were allocating rams to sites and they weren't replicated across all sites. So some animals went to Woodlands, some animals went to Ashley Dean, some animals went to Bakawa, and there were link sires that connected all that. The decision was made that we should, wherever possible, if there was semen available in time, we should use all sires at all sites. And so we've got 4 years of data now for growth and meat traits and 2 years of data for NLB. So we're developing models for that. It's an opportunity to see if the sire rankings change between sites. And so we can look at, do hill sites differ from lowland environments? But we can also say, actually, within hill there's massive differences. Within the flat there's massive differences. Everybody's got a different... Can we just see, are any of those sites different from any other? Don't classify them as easy or hard. Just say, do rams perform differently on those sites? So it's an opportunity for us to test evaluation models, and we're working on that. Our initial results are that there is a minor genotype by environment interaction for growth. It's not terribly strong, but it appears we can measure it, but we're still trying to confirm that. I'd like to be able to say we had some results for NLB, but it just takes time to get that. So we probably need 1 more year's data before we're starting to get some meaningful results about that. But it's on track, and it's being collected, so hopefully we'll have a result for that soon. Add-on projects, as I've said it twice already, it really is a unique sampling of the industry where you are putting in top rams for evaluation. And so it's very broadly representation for the range of breeds and strains that we have in New Zealand. They're very well recorded on a limited number of sites. And in the ram breeder supply agreement, which is written in a 6-point font, and I'm sure probably none of you actually read it, but you have given us permission to use that, to use those for additional research if the committee decides that that is of benefit to the industry. So an add-on application would come in, and we would say, is this for an individual company benefit or something like that, or an individual breeder benefit? And if it's just for one group, we would say no. If it's for industry good, then we would probably say yes. But the terms and conditions are that those rams can't be identified. So it's a resource there. It's set up so that nobody gets any sort of personal gain out of that, but it does allow us to go forward with a lot of research that we wouldn't otherwise be able to do. So to date, I went back and just had a look. We've had 31 applications since meat and wool came into the thing, of which 25 were approved, so most of them were very good. They've provided animals for greenhouse gas emission testing with the PGGRC. They've done a lot of meat and eating quality testing with Ovita and Alliance. A lot of lamb survival work has been done with Ovita. Wool fleece measurements have been done with AgResearch, and it's been part of the RFI, the residual feed intake work. So it's provided data for a whole heap of programs, which is not part of the core program, but it's provided tremendous benefit to you all as breeders in helping develop all those things. So my last slide, what's the future role? It's been a long program, and nothing, as Russell Coutts said this morning, nothing lasts forever. So it does have an important ongoing role in maintaining those connections for the NZGE. And so I put this slide up. This little spider web is absolutely vital if we're going to be able to deliver across breed, across flock evaluations. It's got a research focus for the hubs, and our current focus is very much on looking at G by E. How is that going to affect our analyses? Is G by E a significant factor there? If it is, what can we do? How do we actually treat that? Because we're all the scientists are sort of sitting in fear and going, well, if we do find something, how do we actually deal with that? So if we do, we need to come up with solutions. That's the research focus and a very important part. And as I've said 4 times now, it's a great resource for other programs. Thanks very much. Any questions? John.
Good morning. New Zealand Marina have got a CPT as well. Have you considered linking with them?
There have been some discussions, but their traits are sufficiently different that we've never reached agreement. We haven't talked about that for a long time. It's a good point, and probably we should revisit that.
Yeah, thank you.
Robert Peacock, Neville. What's the drench policy on the 2 main hub sites?
For
the progeny born, but then also in the maternal as they get older, the ewe lambs going into 2-tooths.
So the drench, so these animals are tested for fecal egg count, and so they go through, there is a drench provided at the start of that, then they're monitored, so then they aren't drenched until they go through that. So that's the standard worm-fec protocol for that. So that does modify, they're not just drenched routinely for that. The rest of it is the normal farm policy for that. I'm not sure what that is for Taratahi. John, can you speak to what the one is at Invermay?
When it was at Woodlands, the adult ewes didn't get drenched, and typically there was 3 to 4 drenches in the lambs. So there was a drench at around weaning, or maybe a week prior to weaning, there was a drench. This is in the animals that are not going to slaughter, so basically the ewe lambs. There was a drench probably towards the end of January. there'd be another one probably about mid-March or April, and maybe another drench for those animals. Yep.
On the hub flocks, the farms are basically allowed to manage it by best practice, but the negotiation that we've had with them, so we don't force them to do certain things. There's data that we require, but they are requested to manage those animals so that they get the best possible chance of of expressing their genetics. There could be endless debate about that, but they're trying not to let that be a major limiting factor.
Yeah, morning, Neville. Look, I'm pleased Robert brought that up because that was the basis of my question too. I think we're actually missing a great opportunity here. With the CPT, we're actually got a high input index. We're selecting sheep that perform very well under a big drench regime. And the challenge and the opportunity, I think, is that we need to start selecting for sheep that can maintain that same output, but with less input. The average lamb gets 6 or 7 drenches, and I suspect there's breeders in here that drench their lambs even more. So much of that production is based on how their response to drenching. So my challenge to you guys is, there's people doing worm feck that are operating very low input systems. Let's start challenging some of our CPT sheep to a lower input and see if we can still maintain that output.
And was it you, Hamish, at the session last night said, that in 20 years' time, we're going to need animals that do perform well chemical free. So, going forward, that's very good feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, but now's the time, isn't it?
Yep, now's the time to make a change.
Neville, Graham Soddy. Whereabouts are we now with links with Land Plan over in Australia? Has that been...
That is the bane of my existence. So we've tried to do. We've talked to them on a number of occasions about that, about sharing RAMs that are used in the information nucleus, so that we can create good connections. And I've pushed that as hard as I can with a number of people, but they have kind of rotated through those. I'm across it in Australia next week, and I'll be trying to push that again. But it just seems that there's more push from us, and they do seem a little bit less interested in doing it than we are. So I sent a list of rams which we had semen for that were of similar breeds across to Hamish Chandler, but he's just been busy with other things. So I will be pursuing it, but I'm finding it really hard to make traction. Yes, so there is semen that's collected to a standard that could go across, but also semen could come back. But if it's been... Yes. Oh.
Dave Reid from Wairoa. Further to the high versus low input sheep, I applaud that we've finally... Have we still got a hillside?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, that's good. But what we all really need is a site that's hostile to sheep, like Wairoa or Waikato or Kate's Place or Northland. No, not yourself. The environment, a hostile environment, because there's two issues here. There's a number of inputs as far as drenches or whatever go, and also there's the degree of challenge on the ground. And I'd say that a lot of the sites we've got in the central progeny test at the moment are very low challenge sites. Thank you.
Oh.
Yeah, I actually want to touch base on what's the thread here. My thread is probably a little less impact than what's been suggested by the others, but it's perhaps a little bit more radical. So the point is, we all know here that in 20 years we won't be able to dock our lambs, okay? You just won't be able to do it. We also now know from the Chinese work that there's a major gene that is present in New Zealand about tail length. So my challenge is that none of the hub site lambs should have their tails docked, and we should measure the performance of all the animals without docking the tails of the lambs. And that includes DAG scores and a whole bunch of other stuff. Just a thought.
So we've got ewes that are basically pregnant at the moment. This is a time when some changes could be made, and so it's just good to get input about things that we can, whether we have to get ethics approval for that, but I don't see any reason why we couldn't. You have to put it through that process to make sure that we can do it, but now's a good time to get feedback on some of those issues.
As soon as you do that, you're going to make everyone in New Zealand look at us, and you're
I can't believe you'd stand up, John, and say that. As soon as you start talking about something and you say it's going to happen, you've just speed it up. If you go out there and you do that in these sites and someone gets hold of that in the media, we're now 5 years away from not tailing lambs. And I reckon every time we talk in this room, we talk about things and we speed up the process. And that's something that we don't want to do as far as tails go.
Alan Richardson, so Blair, we hide the situation, we pretend it's not there and it's not coming, and we do nothing.
Yeah, Sam Hain, and I'm a redneck from Gisborne, and I think it's quite interesting. We had Nick Beebe speak to us last night about the New Zealand story, and the New Zealand story, we spend our time selling our clean green image, and I think at some point we have got to be, we've got to make ourselves more sustainable. We've got to look at some of these things, and whether it's like Hamish says, less chemicals going into sheep, or whether it is something more radical like tail docking, I think we've got to look at those things because it's coming. The next thing will be methane emissions or something like that. We've got to keep on staying on top of these things, because that's how we sell our products, is by producing the lowest cost, most sustainable and greenest protein in the world. And perhaps instead of going quite that far, what would be interesting is not docking some of the lambs, because I'd be really interested in knowing just what the economic value of docking lambs is. Is it worth $5 a lamb extra to get them docked, or not at this point in time? And obviously, if the tails get shorter, that difference will decrease.
So there is a core purpose to the central progeny test, that it's providing connectedness, and so we don't have enough animals that we can actually do that kind of thing. We have to deliver on providing those connections between traits, and splitting them up into different contemporary groups causes issues for us. That's not to say that that's not important work to do, but I'm just saying that that's probably not something that we could do that kind of design in the existing CPT framework. The hubs do provide a place that we can do additional research and measure additional traits, but it's still got a core purpose. That we have to fulfil, and we have to make sure we don't compromise that in the things that we do.
Gordon Levitt, Northland. I'd like to follow up on John's comment. Why don't we breed sheep without tails? We've bred horns off cattle, we've bred horns off sheep. The genetic variation enables us to do virtually anything with genetics, and over my lifetime I have noticed that sheep, or docking at time, the length of tail varies greatly. Some have long tails, some have short tails, and nothing has been done about it. And I would like to add on teeth. I've noticed the emergence of teeth varies from time to time. I've found in March a ram with baby's teeth and another one the same age with 4 teeth up. Now the emergence of teeth, if I was younger I would pursue that course, and I'd probably pursue the tail course as well, but age doesn't permit me to do these sort of things. But I think we've got to think as to what is possible using the genetic variation which exists. Thank you.
Oh, that was good discussion. I have no problem letting that go on for longer because that's probably the real value that we get out of these times that we get to meet together. So thanks, Neville. That was brilliant. Up next we have Julia Aspinall. She started Genetic Gains to offer artificial insemination and multiple ovulation and embryo transfer services in 1995. The Woodlands Artificial Breeding Centre and Sheep Improvement Limited Bureau was subsequently added to the services provided by the business in 1999 and 2001 respectively. This enables Genetic Gains to offer a genetics package which helps breeders to identify their most productive animals through the SIL Bureau and to distribute some of the top genetics through the AB Centre and AI services. Julia and her 5 staff are passionate about providing a service that delivers the most beneficial result for the individual sheep breeders and the New Zealand sheep industry as a whole. And I'll just add to that, because Julia was my bureau when I started down south, and Julia doesn't tolerate incompetence, to put it nicely, and which is a very good thing. And so. I made it through 7 years, so I got there. But she was a very good coach, and she taught me a hang of a lot. And her heart is genuinely for the industry, and someone we need to treasure and be thankful for. So welcome to you, Julia.
Thank you, Hamish, I think. I get that from my dad. And good morning, everybody. Isn't it great to be here in Napier with an amazing view that I can see, but you can't, unfortunately, but it's incredible. Somewhere in New Zealand, a stud sheep flock has had a very good year. The ewes went into lambing in really, really good condition. And conditions throughout lambing, the weather was the best ever. Lamb survival was exceptional. There was plenty of quality grass growth throughout the spring, and weaning weights were very good. There may have been the occasional blip in grass growth throughout the summer, but autumn live weights and eye muscle measurements were well above average. The ewes were still in good condition and pregnancy scanning rates were excellent. All that information went into SIL. Somewhere else in New Zealand, conditions have been very tough. There have been drought conditions for some time, and the ewes went into lambing in poor condition. Lamb survival was low. There was minimal grass available throughout the spring, and weaning weights were very disappointing. The rain didn't come during the summer, and autumn live weights and eye muscle scanning measurements were disappointing, to say the least. The ewes were still in poor condition, and pregnancy scanning rates were not good. All that information went into SIL. So SIL now has information from 2 flocks, one that's performed exceptionally well and one that has performed exceptionally badly in the same season, but that difference is not genetic. So SIL is very clever. It can work out how much of that information is environmental and then compare animals, individual animals in each of those flocks based on their genetic merit. But it can only do that if we give it the information. And that's a big if. There's a lot of that sort of information missing off SIL at the moment. We've heard a lot of talk about connectedness over the last day and a bit. And sorry, you're about to hear more, because it is vital to the success of this New Zealand sheep industry as a whole. So to establish connectedness, as you know, we need to share a ram with another connected or linked flock in the same year and retain and measure progeny, at least 20 to 25, from that shared ram in the same year. You need to measure those traits, all the traits that are involved in the index. So for example, if you're using the New Zealand terminal worth, you would have to record all the lambs that are born, dead or alive, every single lamb, and then follow those progeny, 20 to 25 of them at least, from that shared ram through to the autumn. So let's look at various ways in which you can achieve connectedness out there in the industry with the help of the CPT that Neville's already described. Say breeder A, that's Neville. Shares a ram with breeder B, that's Cheryl Ann. And Cheryl Ann shares a different ram with breeder C, that's Annie. And Annie provides the ram for that breeding group to this hub CPT site. Now, providing all breeders, A, B and C, Neville, Cheryl Ann and Annie, all retain and measure 25 progeny from those different shared rams, then they're all connected to the industry. And this is the beauty of breeding groups who work collaboratively together, such as Premier Suftex, Alpha and New Zealand Perrendales. If breeders are willing to work together, they can build these linkages between yourselves and link into the CPT, which Beef and Lamb Genetics has supplied, to connect all the different breeding groups or breeds in the industry. To look at it in another way, perhaps breeder A, B and C, Neville, Cheryl Ann and Annie, perhaps they all use the same ram that was used in the CPT. Remember that all the hub site CPT rams go to an AB centre. So perhaps Neville went to the AB centre and collected that ram, took it home, used it for 10 days. Cheryl Ann picked it up from Neville and took it home and used it for the next 10 days. And Annie might have used it through artificial insemination. So that means breeder A, B and C, or Neville, Cheryl Ann and Annie, are all connected to the CPT hub sites. And then to take it on another layer, breeders D, E and F could each share different rams with Neville. Breeders G, H and I could each share different rams with Cheryl Ann. And breeders J, K and L could share different rams with Annie, either through natural mating or through AI. Remember, it has to be in the same year for it to be effective. And all traits in the index need to be measured. So what happens if sharing by natural mating is not possible? Perhaps you're geographically isolated in some remote pocket of the West Coast or the Chatham Islands. Or perhaps you're not in a breeding group and you're an individual breeder working on your own. Or perhaps you're a small flock and struggle to find access to rams to share. Then one solution is to use artificial insemination. It's a scary thought for some people, using artificial insemination, it seems. And should the ability to use artificial insemination be made easier? At the moment, there are straws available for some of the size that are used in the CPT hub sites, but not from all of them. Should it be available from all of them? And that's something you may like to comment on in the question time. If we followed that, then orders would need to be placed, so you'd need to say that, yes, I would like some straws by that ram by the 28th of February or by the end of February, and the RAM would have to be identified for the CPT by the end of January at the very latest. So AI is not difficult. It's just a matter of inserting a seeder, which is that little white thing in the slide up there, in the vagina of the ewe for about 12 days. You put it out 2 days before the date of AI and remove the ewes from food and water for 12 to 24 hours before the AI. A detailed program is always provided by your operator, so they will tell you all the details of what to do, and it is important to follow those instructions to the letter. The process itself, again, is not difficult. Again, the process varies a little bit from operator to operator, but in general, the ewes are tranquilised while they're still in the catching pen, loaded into a cradle, which is especially designed for this purpose. Half the belly wall is removed, and then the abdomen is sprayed with a disinfectant. 2 shots of local anaesthetic are applied, and then the ewe is inseminated using a laparoscope through the abdomen. So the inseminator will identify the outside of the uterus and inject half a straw into each horn of the uterus. This process takes 1 to 2 minutes. You can see in this picture behind me that there is a ewe ready to be inseminated. My right-hand lady, who's been my right-hand lady since 2001, is preparing a straw for insemination, and behind that, the next ewe is being prepared. So you get a chain reaction going with a series of cradles and ewes and various processes of the AI. So to summarise the requirements for connectedness, it's important to share, it's important for all of you as breeders to share another ram with the CPT or another connected flock in the same year, either through natural mating or through AI. You also need to retain and measure at least 20 to 25 progeny for all the traits in your index, and that although the recommendation is to renew this every year, it does last for 3. So to monitor connectedness, as Cheryl-Ann described yesterday, we bureaus are soon to be able to get out from SIL a chart of groups of flocks or individual flocks, showing how well each individual flock is connected to the industry. And just to interpret what this graph is telling you, the green circles, or the circles from 0 to 3 in them, indicate the strength of the connectedness. So a green 3 is the best you can get. And you can see in the bottom of this graph, flock 4640 is the CPT hub site that was at Woodlands, but now it's at Invermay, has got very strong connections to the industry for all of the gold trait groups listed across the top. So that's reproduction, survival, growth, adult size, meat, wool, worm effect, and DAGs. So all of those traits are recorded in that CPT hub site. If the connectedness gets down to a 1 or 0, a 1 is orange, so it's a warning that yes, it's time to do something to refresh this connectedness. And if it's a red 0, it means there is none, and it's definitely time to do something to refresh that connectedness. A blue cross means that that trait is not collected in that flock. So you can see on the middle flock on this chart, it's flock 3385, which is Taratahi, the other hub CPT flock, which is current. You can see there's a blue cross under facial eczema, and that's because facial eczema isn't recorded in that particular flock because it's covered in the Invermay CPT. The top line is representing one of the new NGEs that Annie's about to talk about. So as you can see, there's only a start to building connections at the moment. So it takes a wee while for these new flocks to develop connections to the industry. Although there were none on this particular graph, an orange or a red smiley means that connections are going to be lost in the next 2 or 1 year, respectively. So these charts enable us to monitor where we are in the industry. So what are the benefits of doing this? Well, as you have heard in the last couple of days, SIL was extremely focused on accuracy. you know that if rubbish information goes into SIL, then rubbish information is going to come out of SIL. And there's a huge focus in SIL to make sure that the data going in and the reports are coming out are accurate so that they're highly meaningful for you. And I think as people in the sheep industry in New Zealand, we are extremely fortunate to have access to this tool. I believe it's an extremely sophisticated system and very flexible. It's possibly not available in many other places in the world. I don't know. So that accuracy is so important to SIL that if flocks are not connected, then they're not going to be able to appear on the sire leader lists, and they're not going to be reported on the website, and they're not going to be available for viewing on Ram Finder. So to enable you to use all these tools that SIL has made available to you, it is very, very important to develop these connections. Any questions?
Morning, Julia. Just wondering, you talked about the AI option, but even just for sharing rams naturally, when is the list chosen each year for which studs are going to have a ram in the CPT, and how early can that list be published so that breeders can see which studs have got a ram in so we can look at linking with them?
That's a Neville question. They're selected sometime in January, aren't they, Neville?
So we ask for that back by around about the 18th of January. Often that's a bit early for the breeders, so every year we get requests, can we wait until we've got another measurement, so a weight or a scanning or something like that, and so they can make that. We could be more firm and say that it's earlier, that it has to be in by that 18th, so that the 18th of January, so that we could let people know by the start of February that it's there. But because the mating dates are now all, both flocks, it's basically I think it's the start of April that they do them. We've got a little bit more time with Pikawa, though in it we had to have those numbers earlier. But
no, I'm not talking about which ram, which stud. When do you choose the stud, like that they've been accepted?
We choose the group and they choose the stud. So choosing the stud and choosing the ram are the same thing for us. So, well, we get the expression of interest comes back. Sometimes that's from an individual breeder, and sometimes that's from a breed society or a sire reference group. We allocate that to that, and so if it's an individual breeder, they'll pick it from their own flock. If it's a sire reference group, it's up to them to pick one that's widely used, and we'll just check that it is check that it has been used already. So we don't pick we let them pick the ram, and if it's a group, they pick the flock as part of that process.
Yeah, but when do you choose that? You could still tell us which group has been chosen. How early can you let us know?
So that's chosen. It is chosen in late December, so they're always notified by Christmas. So that's the earliest we could let you know what that group is, and there's no reason we couldn't.
Currently, there is no list, though, is there? So that's something that perhaps could be considered. To publish a list of who's got, what groups have got.
We've discussed that a number of times, and there's nothing to stop that list being published. There's no issue there.
Okay.
Frustrates the hell out of me, being quite keen on being accurate with my recording, that you're making a big assumption, and that is that everyone's following best practice. And I've found out in the last year someone who's been recording for years that I thought would have been doing things right, and they're not. So what sort of checks and balances have you got in place to make sure that you're not being let down by people not having best practice?
Do you mean from people contributing sires to the CPT, or just SIL breeders in general?
both, Julia?
Right, wow. There's no policeman wandering around waving a big stick saying you must do it this way, but there's been plenty of information circulated about what best practice is. Annie sent out a book last year. People with our bureau have had seminars, newsletters, documents on what best practice is. It's pretty much up to the breeder to follow that. However, there are some checks. There are always some checks when we load data into SIL to make sure that nothing that's totally unrealistic is loaded in there.
That's great. I'm one of your bureau clients and I'd back that up. But not all bureaus are present here. And I've been here 3 or 4 times and the bureau that I'm talking about has never been present here.
Can't comment on that, sorry. Right, this time.
Just one more question.
Sorry, Julia. Peter Moore from Nelson. This isn't actually a question for you, it's more of a comment. We talk about sending rams around the country, which is an easy thing to talk about, but a very difficult thing to do. And I wonder whether there's any comments or things from people here as to easy ways to do that, or companies to use that don't end up leaving rams in T-Row when they're supposed to be coming to Nelson for a week, or dropping rams in Blenheim, or being told they're being dropped in Blenheim and being sent to Balclutha, which for Nelson is quite a difficult thing. So are there any comments about who we can use?
Yeah, I belong to a sire reference group in the North Island. Of course, we're all looking for facial eczema as well. You just make it work. It costs because you're going to do more driving, and there's always risk to rams because they're going here, there, and everywhere. But you make it work because of the value. I try to use my rams at home first so that if they don't come back in a timely way or they get injured, then, you know, I've already got the genetics in the flock. But it's not easy and it's not free, but it's worth it at the end. And it's a mindset. You've just got to get your head around the idea that these rams are going to do the route. You know, we've got a reference group, so we pick rams, we pick a first and a second, and then we do a lot of trading and swapping and stealing, as Steve alluded to last night. So it's just something, and because, you know, you might be looking for traits, like I'm looking for parasite tolerance and eczema, so that limits me. So you've just got to be open-minded about where you're going to go and then just make it work. You've got to do it.
I'll add to that. Excuse me.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to sit down.
Just as far as a logistics things goes, Peter, in my experience, downland's dear. If you want to back a company, I would go nowhere else. Yep, we were going North Island, South Island, everywhere, and they made the job so much easier. And so full credit to them, because that's what's allowing connectedness to carry on in a very smooth manner. It costs you a bit more. It's cheap in the long run. Yeah. So yeah, thank you, Julia. We'll give her one more clap. I'd just like to add to that too. One of the things I found for John Booker's question about best practice, EID, that just changed overnight how we could record traits. So you never have to read tags again. Condition scoring was easy. Live weight was easy. So I know. I think it's just a no-brainer to get into EID and make it so much easier for yourself and for the commercial client. Anyway, I'll get on to the next speaker, which is Annie O'Connell. And Annie started her career at Ag Research as a technician and scientist in reproductive physiology and sheep genetics. Her PhD explored embryo survival in sheep. Most recently, she worked for Blue River Dairy. It's a sheep milking operation in Southland before joining Beef and Lamb Genetics. She has had considerable experience in performance data systems and communicating with farmers. Her Dunedin-based role focuses on helping commercial farmers and breeders apply genetic genetics to their business objectives. And so I also work on an advisory group with Annie and the reproductive team at Invermay. So her knowledge on the reproductive side and that the way a sheep operates is second to none. And it's wonderful to have Annie as part of the beef and lamb genetics team to help connect breeders and farmers. So hand you over.
All right, good. So I was given the task of having a talk about the value that we're getting from our next generation progeny test sites. And as I was preparing the talk, I also realised I want to talk about the more value we can get from it. So I'm going to expect some feedback from you, and I'm sure you'll have your questions about how we're going to extract the best value out of these next generation sites. We have implemented them and we've gone so far, but I'm sure there's more we can do. Neville talked about the CPT review and that the next generation sites have been established in response to that review, and about in summary, just that testing more rams, testing younger and proven rams in more commercially relevant environments, and partnering with industry. Those are the core principles that we've been adhering to in those next generation sites. For those of you at last year's talk, I haven't done any animations on this slide. It won't flick through quickly. But it is the same sort of slide I put up, but there's some extra additions. So just here in the middle is representing the hub site with the 22 rams that get assessed there that Neville talked about. We've got PML, the partnership that we have with PML and Horizon Farms, with the terminal size being assessed up there, about 45 rams at that site. The South Island Genomics Calibration Site, we've got 50 terminal size measured there. That's with the partnership with that Farm IQ site. Smedley, the site that's focusing on maternal hill performance, and we've got 25 rams from the Pirrendale Society measured there. This year we've added a new site, having a look at FE, and just using the tools that we've already got to look at tolerance for FE and see if we can really get this in a way that commercial farmers can understand it and start choosing rams that they're going to be better for their farm. So we've got this partnership with Otafiti. The South Downs have also come to us and they said, look, we're organised, we're going to have a progeny test. We can get some, we want to be doing a terminal sire progeny test as well. And we've managed to get some linked sires into the hub with them. The North Island Romney group is a group that we're talking to, and we have some connection. We haven't got anything really formal there yet with getting linked sires into the progeny test, into the hub, but just it's another group that we are having some association with. And I've got a question mark up there. I don't know, it's all about how far the budgets will stretch, but you know, like it's not a finished package yet. Each of those sites also has another name, often referred to by their farm name. So there's just flip back. Mariatotra, Duncragan, the Pirrendale, and so Smedley is a farm name and the Pirrendale is a partnership. Otafiti is a partnership with the FE breeders, and the South Down have just still stayed with the South Down name so far. Let's try and do that. 2 names is difficult. Those same colours I've used on this next slide, I'm just going to highlight. I mean, I don't expect you to really read the numbers there, but if you can, that's good. These are each individual ram that's on each of those sites in 2017. Okay, these first 2 columns here are the hub sites, and they've got exactly the same rams mated at Invermay and at Tautahi. The green here is the 2 linked sires that are mated at the PML or Mariatotra site. And you can see all the extra rams that are going along aside that site. Again, the yellow is a linked sire to the South Island Genomic Calibration Site, the blues to Smedley, pink to Otafiti, and the grey to South Down. And these were the 1990 sires that Neville referred to. Okay. So a big raft of rams in there coming in just as 1 year of mating in 2017. I'm going to put that in a wee soundbite for you. So this year we're mating 186 rams, and we've got them on 7 sites. One of them is a pure research farm. The 6 can be classified as commercial farms, and including Of those 6, 3 of them are cadet training farms. And so we really think we're starting to deliver on this more rams, younger, and at more commercially relevant environments and partnering with industry. So pretty proud that implementation seems to be happening in my mind, but I'd welcome your feedback. Another little soundbite from that is the CPT is measuring performance in 186 rams from 81 flocks. And those flocks are representing 65,000 lambs that were born in 2015. So it's about 20% of the SIL lambs that are added annually. So we've got some good penetration here, good coverage here. But use of a CPT ram at home to connect more flocks, I absolutely agree that would be wonderful. That's what we need. We need to keep encouraging that. And Julia's done a great job of explaining the spider web of connections that we can do to do that. So I really hope you embrace that and try and get some more out of that. So on to the best use of next generation sites and the hub sites. So getting connectedness, mating by AI at the CPT site and using that AI rams at home and or as a group reference sire, that's a great use. Getting connectedness by mating the ram naturally at the CPT site and mating it naturally at home first and sending it to the CPT site. That's good. And mating naturally at the CPT site and use it at home afterwards is also another way to get connectedness in that same year. And if I think about the sites, the hub site's achieving the top one. Otawhiri has chosen to try and do connectedness by having that mating before going to the CPT site. And Smedley and South Downs have chosen a short mating period to get the ram to be able to get home in time to get some progeny at home as well. So it's possible. It's difficult, but it's possible. And it's all about working in partnership and coming up with these agreements of how that's going to work without having undue risk to the health of the rams that you're putting into that progeny test. So I'm also proposing, or this is what we're doing, is using the best, or the rams that have done the best in the previous year, and they are going to be the link sires. So that way there's going to be new link sires every year, so we're getting something new into the hub, we're getting more in-depth information from them. But they are, by doing 2 things, they're going to be a year-on-year link at the next generation site, and they're also the next generation site to the hub link. So the 2 rams that were the best from 2016 mating, I have chosen them to be mated at Smedley, for example, in 2017, and they also are mated at the hub site in that same year. So getting 2 uses out of the same. And this is a question that Julia posed. Should semen from these link sires be made more available in wider industry? And I'm sure I'll get some feedback from that. I think we're sort of going on that track, aren't we? Because those should be chosen, the link sires could be chosen a bit earlier than the expression of interest, for example, I suppose. Yep. So I'm just going to move on then, I've had a lot of feedback to say some people think of the CPT as just one thing and don't recognise the different farms, the different next generation sites. So I just thought I'd take a wee moment just to, let you know what's been measured at those different sites, so maybe it'll help with this conversation. And we've obviously got those posters up. I don't know if you got to see those during drinks or a lunch and afternoon teas, but we have got all these in a poster form now. So I'll refer to the poster, so it's a bit of an image, but I'll do the details on the next slide. So I'll talk about the hub first, and you've got the 2 sites that Neville talked about, Invermay and Taratahi. The 22 new rams are being measured annually to about 1,000 ewes, and those ewes are reused, and the progeny of those, the progeny are used as dams within that flock as well. It's all AI, and the link sires and mature rams are accepted. Got dam and sire parentage there, and it's so we've got DNA parentage and we've got tagging at birth. And the purpose is that connectedness across flocks, dual purpose and terminal sire, and it's also underpinning the beef and lamb genetics research programs like Neville outlined. And it's an expression of interest for the ram entry and it's strategic selection as well. And look at all those gold trait groups that are covered in that hub. So reproduction, survival, growth, adult size, wool, meat, worm feck, FE, DAG, stability, body condition score. It's all covered in that hub site. Moving on to Mariah Totra, so the PML, the one that was green, was the first one that came on to the next generation site family. We've got 45 rams mated there annually, 1,600 ewes, but they're different ewes annually. So, and we've got natural mating with the ram hoggets or tutus are accepted there. So because it's new ewes every year, we're really we're working with sire-only parentage to keep those costs manageable. And it's also involving information with the meat module that Neville's gone through with yesterday's talks as well. And this is one that we do have a RAM entry by expression of interest annually. But the focus here is about growth and meat. And I've got the star there because we still need to have the meat module come to maturation before we can really get that. Well, it's quite reliant on that module coming through. Okay. Duncragan then, it's another terminal sire site. This is the South Island Genomic Calibration Site. There's 45 rams, 800 ewes, and different ewes again annually. And there's natural mating with some AI. Yep. And so to keep those costs down still, it's with the sire-only parentage, and it's used for, we've got to remember the focus there is about providing a resource for genomic calibration. So the RAM entry has been chosen by FarmIQ, so there's no expression of interest for that one. And it is growth and meat, and again relying on the meat module outcomes as well. Again, some meat quality, some special stuff there. Smedley, the maternal hill site, is 25 rams, 1,000 ewes, and we're reusing the ewes, and the progeny will become dams, so a little bit like the hub site here. We're focusing on just the hogget rams, and we have AI only with the link sires. Dam and sire parentage is what we're using there. I've got a little bit of automatic clicking through here, but again, that's all right. Where am I at? Smedley, thank you. So, and we're also going to DNA sample the dead lamb, so we'll get an idea of survival on this one. Because you can't, like Julia said, we need to actually get, it's not just a dam and sire parentage of the live lambs, I need to know what was the sire of the lambs that were dead. Because I'm naturally mating, you know, a twin can be fathered by different sires, so we definitely need those dead lambs sampled, and Smedley have agreed to have a crack at that this year. Its primary purpose is about connectedness for the Perindale flocks, in the way it is at the moment. And the RAM entry is negotiated with the Perindale Society, and we help out with that as well. And we're doing a wide range of traits there. Reproduction, survival, growth, adult size, wool, meat, hogget fertility, so they're mating the hoggets as well. They're measuring FE, and we're doing stability and body condition score traits there as well. So a really good deep graft, and that's in that cadet farm, so they're learning about performance, recording, and value of genetics as well. Otafiti then, the new one to the program, the one that's focusing on facial eczema. This year we've had 34 rams mated there. We've mated it to 1,000 new hoggets. So this time we've done a little bit of difference, trying to, it ended up being a nice opportunity that they weren't expecting to keep the progeny from those hoggets anyway, so we weren't interfering with their whole program, but also had another raft of benefits for us with mating, that we had a chance to get, or more time to get the program sorted, and a chance to get those rams used at home first. Though we will be reusing, we will use those ewes, so next year they'll be mated as tutus as the intention. And the progeny, there'll be a smaller number of progeny there, but they will be available to come up and be dams as long as they grow out well. So that's one of the things that Otafiti have just indicated. They'd love to see if they could get hogget lambs, or lambs from hoggets that can actually go on to be something in their breeding flock. It's not something they currently do right now. They've done the natural mating of the hogget rams, and they're using AI link sires. We will be doing dam and sire parentage. We haven't focused on the maternal trait of it, the survival stuff at the moment, because we're not going to be measuring those not really assessment of maternal performance here. So it's just a dam and sire parentage of the live lambs. And the focus is connectedness for the FE breeders. It's genomic tools and RamGuard being demonstrated to predict FE tolerance and demonstrate this to commercial farmers. We want to get them to understand what's going on there. We will do a RAM expression of interest entry, but it will be with FE breeders annually, and it's in the partnership with what they're going to get out of it. And so growth and FE are the core traits that we're going to get out of this site. Okay. Southdown. So this one, they wanted to come and join us or see if they could get something organised to get more connectedness amongst themselves. And so they got pretty organised, and we had a few discussions about it. And Dave Robertson's led most of this as well. But 25 rams have been mated this year with about 800 ewes, and they're looking to maybe reuse those ewes. The sire-only parentage, though, with DNA and looking to tag at birth and get some extra information. They want to provide connectedness across the South Down flocks and with industry, so getting this linkage into the CPT hub, and looking at explore meat quality. And the ram entry is chosen by the South Down Society, so it definitely is their site and their progeny test as well. And the growth and meat are the key things that are coming out of that one. So that's all the sites I've got to hand. I'm just going to take a wee breather there. I suppose we'll wait for, I've got a few more slides yet. Hamish, how are we going for time? Good? Okay, so I'll leave the questions, if you've got questions about this, come back at the end. But I just want to take a wee pause, because now I wanted to talk about the value from the next generation, I finished the value from the next generation project test. I want to talk about the reporting that we can do from there. So we've had a lot of discussion about reporting. Obviously, our review told us that they're putting out the booklet wasn't really what breeders wanted, that then there was still some information, don't want to send a ram off and hear nothing about it, how things are going, or any results and stuff. So it's been a variety of questions about it. And so I just want to get the summary information, see what we actually really want for us to do and what you're wanting to use it for, so we can deliver it what you want, but not going off tangent and doing things that you don't need. So just thinking about, can I click to the next? No, the other way? Thank you. So just trying to think about the use of the CPT by breeders. And I know I'm talking to you, this will be, hopefully this will ring the bells of what you're trying to get out of the CPT. But I'm assuming you're using it to inform where your flock ranks relative to other flocks. You want to know where you're going to be able to get new genetics. Whether or not, if you're at the top, whether or not you can get more of like-minded rams, or if you want to ramp up your system, where to go to seek it to add that in. And you really want to be able to inform your own ram selection at mating. So you want to know what you're doing with, if you've got rams in the CPT, you want to know what you're doing with any of their relatives, if they're doing well or not in that CPT. If there's anything to add to that list, I'd love to hear that. I just want to talk about the results that you've currently got available to help with those choices. So you've got data, it's collected from all CPT sites, and it's promptly loaded into SIL. Okay? So it's immediately available at the next NZGE run. So it's in that weekly run of the EBVs and indexes as soon as that data's been collected from the CPT site. So you can have a look in the NZGE run, or have a look on RamFinder regularly, although I do note RamFinder is updated bi-monthly. Is that right, Sharon? Yeah. With research EBVs and indexes, so we need more time. So if it's something that's a bit special, like something from the meat module, it needs a bit more time to get through that analysis, so we can't really rush that out, and it doesn't go automatically into SIL. And so we can really only report, with those research EBVs, we really can only report on how the RAM ranks within that CPT group. So we did release, Neville released this in autumn this year, e.g. the PML results on the meat traits in 2017. And we did say that the results are considered confidential to breeders submitting rams, just because we don't want to get this mixed, different breeding values, different indexes out there. It's not in line with that one version of the truth that we're talking about. We want those SIL values. And if you're looking for rams that, where you're ranking, or looking for ones that are on the top that you want to add to your system, the NCG sire leader list on the SIL website, they're also updated bi-monthly, and so they're informed by all the same information. So if your ram was getting information on progeny measured at a CPT site, it's informing SIL, and then it's going available into informing the leader list as well. So there's those things that are already there, but I've heard you, there's probably some more things we need. So what is it? What more do we need? We can provide site updates on progress, so you can deliver on a site-by-site basis. I think for Otawhiti, they've started doing, Max is working on giving more regular updates. We've done an activity that there's a wee blurb about the cadets there and what they're getting out of it. It sort of can provide summary data with how pregnancy scanning's gone, or that sort of thing. But we wouldn't be able to do too much about individual rams, or that would be quite onerous to do that. We could do, this is something that's sitting with me right now that I'm definitely going to be doing, is timeline of events for each site, and we could have that provided to those that are supplying rams, so that you know when to expect new data updates. Our wee idea popped up, should we be actually providing wee alerts to you, to those that have supplied RAMs to each of the sites, as to when new data has been entered, and some people have asked for that, so I'd love to hear feedback if you don't think that would be quite good, and we'll think about how we could do that. And the summary of results, though, because we don't want to release this booklet that's got a different, like just only CPT ranking, if we're going to release a league table, if you do decide that's something you would like, or see a booklet form, because some people have asked for a booklet, we could do a summary of results that could be released annually with the RAMs presented in the NZGE percentile band ranges. And so that way, instead of ranking the RAM just the CPT set, that would be better reflecting his national ranking rather than just that CPT ranking. So, but, you know, if we did something like that, do you want a booklet or do you want it on the website, or is that not really of use at all? And so those are my questions.
Hang on, Russell.
G'day, Annie. Thank you very much for your presentation. I thought it was really good. Look, suggestion on the booklet. The CPTs are there to organise SOACE. My suggestion is we stick to the one method of the truth, you know, so that we don't have confusion in our industry. It's there to sort out the gene base. It's a wonderful tool, and I want to see us lift all of New Zealand up. We need our sheep industry to work together, because our competition is other land uses, and we have been sadly lacking in the ability to retain land use in New Zealand, and we've seen a terrific expansion, and I think that we have great spread of genes in New Zealand, and the CPT is a great way of sorting them out. So I think you want that as an overall principle,
okay,
and to try and say that, and that we're in competition with one another, but in a way, someone who has a top ram for one trait, if we know where it is, and that's a key point, we can use it, and that breeder who uses that then puts their air tag in it. So effectively, the resulting progeny become theirs, and it helps the whole industry. We lift everyone up doing that. So congratulations again on your report. So thank you.
Just down the back, Becky.
Hi, Annie. 186 rams, 81 flocks. Why only 81 flocks? There's 186 flocks that could have been there.
With the natural mating, we expect that some rams may not be able to, there'll be some that will fail. And so to protect that for any ram breeder putting in rams for a natural mating situation, especially with ram hoggets, we've asked them to provide more than one. So that's why it's 81 flocks. Yeah. Well, if we had, yeah, I mean, that's really the choices. We could do more rams, but then we'd probably have to do AI to be really certain of getting enough progeny from everybody. Trade-off?
Just a comment, with these next generation sites, what you're wanting is industry support, which is us, and we all pay to put rams in there. That wasn't mentioned there. What I would like to see is just, as these sites are developed, that those of us that may be contributing rams get a design plan, that we get health protocols in place well ahead so that we are prepared. Some of these have been rushed a bit, and it has resulted in frustration for some of the breeders that have been involved. And I realize this is a work in progress, and you guys are all doing your best, but if we're going to be contributing, we need assurances that best practice is followed on these sites, and that the management is up to that standard, that we know what's going to be going on, and also that we know what we're going to be getting out. And I think that timeline you showed at the end was a really good idea, that we get updates and we know what's going on. So, you know, I realize again that this is evolving, but we need assurances that things are going to be done right, and we have good communication all the way through, so that we've got confidence to put our rams in there, and that they aren't going to be negatively impacted, you know, just because management maybe isn't up to scratch.
It's a fair comment, Kate. Thank you.
Leon Black. I'm a bit slow this morning, Annie. Late night.
Me too.
But I must be missing something. Best practice, and we heard about it yesterday, to do, say, a terminal sire index, you need silly things like growth, meat, and survival. And I saw a whole lot of blanks up there. Can you backfill that? Why have we been missing a key component of our overall traits? And if we're told we have to record them, and then we do sites like the New Age sites that fail to do it, am I going to do a lot more blanking than I thought?
Yeah, so Leon, it's something I want to see if we could get more survival, because I totally agree with you, but it ends up being, it is a cost-benefit situation where to be able to DNA sample dam and sire parentage and sampling the dead lambs is an extra cost. And so you would probably, to afford it within our budget, you'd be doing less rams. And so we're actually just thinking about maybe doing a bit of a cost-benefit analysis of what value are we losing with not having survival in that over whether or not we should be doing less rams. So I need to have a look at we think we should do a wee project on that, or just a bit of a number crunch on that to sort of see what is a cost benefit there. But I think too it's a glaringly obvious missing thing on the survival for terminal sire sites. So share you. Good. But it's definitely a trailer.
Have you got any other questions, Annie, that you want to ask?
Well, so if I flip back to my previous slide, have I got a chance to do that? Is it possible to flip back, IT? So summary updates, is that show of hands of who wants summary updates on a CPT site to see how things are going? Oh yeah, so it sounds like it's a pretty good thing to do, regular updates. Timeline and events, that would be something you would like to know ahead of time? Yep. And what about alerts? Would you need an alert to know when the data's gone in? Is that something of value, or if you've got the timeline, it's okay? Timeline's fine? Okay. And what about the summary of results? Whether or not, I think from Russell's point of view, it wasn't needed to be putting out a booklet or a summary of results. Is that everyone else share that? So you don't want a booklet or a summary of CPT results? Hands up if you don't want one. Just hands up if it's not needed. Cool. So it's not needed. Great. Righto. So make still ace easier, the leader list easier to find and get sorted. Okay, cool.
Is there a way to highlight CPT rams on cell ace?
Is there a way?
Yeah, so that on cell ace we can identify CPT rams.
Well, not currently, but we could put up the CPT RAM list if that would be. And if you want to know more about rams we're going to get linkage from, that's something we could look at. But yeah, but that's been really helpful to me. I suppose we've got some time, have we, Hamish, or are we at the end of it? Or? Yeah, if there's a general question to answer, I think then. Yep.
Okay, Peter A. Mayabicus Bio. We had I think a hung jury on the leaving tails on and leaving the sheep really tough. I'm not sure if that direction was directed at the hubs, but I think it would be a bit difficult to make that happen given the sort of hung jury and the crowd. So why don't the breeders that are advocating that get together and set up their own next generation site and set up the environment that they want to do it in and lead the way that way? So just the challenge, let's have some leadership coming from down in the ranks, and that can really make a difference.
Thank you, Annie. All right, well, I'll just finish with a couple of points. When I look back to often I hear breeders have a tax at sill and the program, and I was one of them. I used to, there were issues with sill when you think it's the sill problem, but actually most of the problems are poor recording inaccurately. So again, this is where your bureau, I feel, is really valuable in making sure that you get recording the traits properly. And the other reason I think is probably, I don't know, put a number out there, 60, 70% of the problems goes back to a lack of connectedness or a lack of linkage. So rams fall out or go wonky because it's not connected to the system properly. So really good recording and really good linkage is the foundation to a really good breeding program for likes of sill and the NZGE. The next thought I had was when I look at the analogy of the sailing, I think the cycling versus the arms grinders is probably the DNA or the genomic data going into the system. But what's interesting is that, you know, someone came up with the idea of using cycles in a boardroom or a meeting, but it was probably 2 or 3 years before everyone gained the trust of that system that it could work. So they took the risk and it paid off, but it took time. So I think as Beef and Lamb Genetics and the team, who are doing a wonderful job, have to also understand that trust has to be built between them and the breeders for there to be buy-in. And so we need more demonstration, I think, about these new technologies that they work well in reality. So pushing through just because of time constraints is not always the best idea. For another year or two to get total buy-in is far better gains for the future. And my last point, I guess in the last 10 years, 10, 20 years, a lot of the rams and the bulls that are being sold size sells. I think they've done research that says the bigger the bull or the ram, the higher the price. My prediction for the future is that it will go the other way. The smaller the sheep may even get a higher price. And I think in the future, philosophy will sell. Your direction of where you're going will sell, not the size of the sheep. So anyway, thank you for this excellent morning that we've had. Absolutely fundamental topics that we've had here this morning to get our brains around that, and we'll be in really good stead for the future of our sheep industry and beef industry. So now we've got Smoko next door, and then we're on the bus at what time?
We've got morning tea next door, and we want to be on the bus at at 15:15. So you've got almost a half-hour smoko. Yeah, there you go. And on the bus out the front. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.